Welcome to the WordPress Photography Podcast, the podcast for photographers who want to learn how to get the most out of WordPress to grow their photography business. You don't need to be a geek to understand WordPress. Settle back and listen as we show you how. Now, here's your host, Scott Wyden-Kivowitz.
Welcome to episode 7. My name is Scott Wyden-Kivowitz, and I'm joined by my co-host, Rachel from Photoscribe. Hey, Rachel.
Hey, Scott. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
Good.
It's been a few days since our last episode, which is now live, actually. It went live this morning, which is great. That's the one with Brian Caparicci. That was a great conversation.
Yes.
And today we've got another guest. Now, this is somebody who does a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff for photographers with WordPress. Also runs a photography workshop company, which we'll learn about, which is really cool, and the website's run on WordPress. So Jake McCluskey is a husband, father, photographer, and online digital coach. After building websites for a decade in WordPress, Jake has focused his abilities on helping people create what they need online to be successful. When he is not helping people with websites, he is traveling and working with some of the best photographers through Shutterclick adventures, teaching photography, Photoshop, and Lightroom. So, welcome, Jake.
Hi, Jake. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on. We love your background in WordPress, and then, helping photographers on WordPress is kind of our jam, so.
Yes. So, before we dig into what's going on with you, we like to start with a bit of WordPress photography-related news. Yep. For anybody who watched episode 2, there's some sad news about a plugin that Christine raved about in that episode. MailChimp, the email marketing company, is stopping development of their very popular social plugin.
Yep.
Now, Christine loves this plugin. She absolutely loves the plugin. She's sort of heartbroken the fact that MailChimp is not going to be developing it anymore.
Yeah.
We also talked to Tamara about this plugin in episode 3, and I believe she's using it as well. But
I don't think she's using it, but we did. There was a section where we talked back and forth about it, so I just wanted to make a note that that is the same plugin we're talking about here that is no longer being supported.
Yeah. So hopefully someone will take over the plugin, update it with some modern features, and keep it going. There's over 40,000 users of the plugin, so it really needs to keep going. My gut feeling as to why they are not going to be developing this anymore is how often Facebook and Twitter and all these social networks change their algorithms and API. MailChimp doesn't want to keep up with it. So that's my guess.
That's actually what we talked about in episode 3 with Tamara, is that that social was the best plugin to keep up with those things, and they had the least downtime when the Facebook API or the Twitter API would change. But obviously, you can see it's almost like it needs to be its own company that can keep up with that stuff. So
yeah. So hopefully someone will pick it up from MailChimp, or just fork, meaning copy the plugin and make it their own, which they can do legally under the GPL license.
So if we hear anything, we'll let you know. And then, Scott, what does this mean for photographers who are using it? Do you recommend that they, keep it on their site and just watch for it? I mean, what do you think?
It's a tough call, because typically with any theme or plugin, you want to make sure it's up to date, compatible with updates in WordPress, compatible with other plugins, and it stays secure in case something goes wrong. Without MailChimp developing it, it's going to stay sort of stagnant for a long time. So I would say use it until you find an alternative solution, or use it until you notice a problem on your website, and then just get rid of it and hope that something else comes along that's similar.
And if we hear anything again, we will keep you updated.
Yes. So, Jake, what's going on in your world?
Not a lot. I mean, having 2 kids around all the time is definitely entertaining. We just moved into a great old house, which is going to probably be the slow and painful death of me over the next 10 years. Fixing up a 100-year-old house is always a blessing and a curse. It's nothing major. Luckily, the house has been kept in good shape, but it's all little stuff. I'm in the process of slowly hunting for a new camera. I go through cameras probably too often. I think I went through 3 different cameras last year. And now I'm looking for something. I can't find exactly what makes me happy when I travel and shoot, so it's kind of a trial and error. I mean, currently I'm running with a little Olympus because it's nice and small and light, and I can literally shove this in my jacket pocket and go. But as you know, a macro 4/3 sensor isn't always the nicest to play with. So it's, I can't quite decide. There's some cool stuff coming out. Olympus is doing some cool stuff. They may actually even have a full frame coming, it looks like. Nikon just released their new series using the super new fast XQD cards. I don't know if you've seen those yet.
Oh, yes. Those are very nice.
Yeah, and so they've got some stuff. Sony's always somebody I keep looking at, but I haven't decided yet. So, that's kind of where I'm at. Other than
what kind of photography do you shoot? Landscape mostly?
Mostly panoramas.
Yep.
I shot a lot of landscape, and I shoot landscape. I'm not opposed just to shooting it. But something about seeing the whole scene, and even on a full-frame camera, I don't ever feel like I can get, the epicness of the whole scene. You go to, the Badlands here in South Dakota, and it's this, you're standing on this point, with, these awesome, drop-offs that are, insane, 30, 40, 50 foot down if you fell, and it's all these canyons, and how do you catch all that in one shot?
Yeah.
And so it's I started shooting panos because I felt like, hey, I'm standing at this awesome location, but how does a single photo capture how it really feels? And then, when I'm not doing that, I'm actually about to relaunch my site doing coaching for photographers. I deal with a lot of actual coaches, life coaches, business coaches, with WordPress only, helping them get their site set up, how to create, effective sales funnels and get the conversions that they want and get them piped to social media. It's interesting. These guys, they're hugely successful, and they just don't have, and they don't have all the pieces in place. So it's like, if you're this successful without it,
yeah.
WordPress, if we get WordPress running for you instead of against you, how successful can you be?
So you have a very unique perspective on WordPress in terms of what photographers need. What do you think your number one, if a photographer had one thing they should do on their site, what would you recommend?
Sell photos.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, but I mean, seriously, no, I mean, there's two things they really need to do, and they go hand in hand. I mean, one, they need to have their photos, I think they need to have their photos on their site available for sale, not piping them off to SmugMug or piping them off to, Fine Art America or any of those other services.
Yeah.
Because what you're really doing is you're actually building competition against you by doing that. So if somebody searches for your name and all your photos are over on SmugMug, for instance.
Yep.
SmugMug has a bunch of folks there, a bunch of content. If you actually put your photos up right with a title, a description, all the pieces you're supposed to, you keyword them, you send them over to SmugMug, you're actually building your own competition for people to find your site. And I'm a huge, I'm hugely against that. I don't see why. We all have a website for a reason. We want people to follow us. We want to build our name. Why are we paying hundreds of dollars every year to SmugMug to become our own competition? It just doesn't make sense to me. And so the first thing I try to do is convince them, to get to Next Gen Pro, and get the Pro, so you can sell your photos. Take the time to do it. And the second part of that, though, is actually, get your SEO squared away with, SEO by Yoast is probably one of my favorites, because they work hand in hand. You can't really, your SEO is going to be great, but if you don't have the content there, what's the word? Why do you do it? And if you have the content there and you don't have SEO, so I kind of really think those two they're not separate. They're very much one and the same thing. So that's kind of, what I try to get them to do is teach them, let's bring it all back to you. And it's tough. It's, they're so used to doing it a certain way, they don't want that change.
And this is good for landscape photographers who need to sell photos publicly. This is also good for wedding photographers, event photographers who need to sell their photos privately. Either way, you want to be able to control the whole process top to bottom and not outsource it to a third party.
So NextGen Pro has that functionality, but I don't know that a lot of photographers know that. So
Right.
what you're equating it to is you're equating NextGen Pro on your WordPress site to going out and using the Zenfolio, using the Smug Mugs, and having it be on their servers. Because
Right.
when you Google yourself, you'll come up with hopefully your own website, and then you'll also come up with these other sites, the Zenfolios, the Smug Mugs. And so you're saying that you're building competition on your own. Now, for a photographer who's new and the WordPress is intimidating, how do you think? And I know the answer to this, so I'm asking you. But for someone installing NextGen Pro and trying to sell photos on their own site, like, what do you think is the beginner's handbook to that?
I mean, I'm gonna just throw a shout out to the NextGen guys and their YouTube channel for that. I mean, the truth is a lot. The resources are all there. You don't need to even really go hunt for it. I mean, if you just go to the YouTube channel and start looking, it tells you how to start off and to get all the steps in a row and end. And the support like that for plugins, as you guys both know, isn't always the case.
Right.
I mean, even for high-end paid plugins, I mean, I've got a number of plugins I like to use, depending on the circumstance, and some of them aren't cheap. I mean, they're $150, $200 a plugin, and their support isn't that good. And you would think, hey, I'm spending $200 on this, there should be some good support. It's just not the case.
Yeah.
And so what I tell people, and actually I've got a gal that I'm helping right now get set up, and she wanted to learn how to do it on her own, and so I actually sent her a link to YouTube for elegant themes on how to set up Divi, and so she could do it. She wanted to have NextGen on her site and eventually upgrade it to Pro, so I sent her a link to the YouTube channel for that. And she actually sat there and built her whole site without ever touching WordPress by watching these videos in about 3 days.
Wow. So there's resources out there. That's actually really good for photographers because they're visual learners, or at least you would assume they're visual learners. So that's probably where the YouTubes and the videos come in.
And why we record the podcast as video.
Right. Although that's just awkward. Again, an hour to get ready for hair and makeup, and you guys just roll out of bed. So.
Hey, I've been up for a little while.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I've had enough time to make a cup of tea and drink my cup of tea.
Right.
So you work with a lot of photographers with their websites.
Yep.
And you use WordPress for your own website, which is currently being redone.
Yep.
What are some of your favorite tools to work with in WordPress for the photographers, aside from the one you mentioned? For example, I know that just from knowing you, there's a certain theme that you've already mentioned, but there's one theme that you like over others for various reasons. Why don't you talk about which theme that is and why you like that?
Sure. I'm a huge fan of elegant themes, and they do Divi, and now it's actually Divi 2, and they've just released a second one. I believe it's called Event or something like that, or I can't remember. I'll actually have to look it up while I'm talking to you. That actually uses the Divi backbone, and I'm not sold as a web guy for as long as I've been doing it. I'm not sold on page builders.
Wait. Okay. So yeah, let's pause for a second and talk about what is Divi.
So Divi is a WordPress theme that actually has a very simple page builder into it, so that you don't have to know how to code or anything to get pretty layouts.
Yeah.
Divi's also just released a second. I think it came out in December. A second theme called Extra that's built on the Divi framework. And essentially what it is you go into your WordPress site and you click on it and you get this very simple page builder that's almost a drag and drop.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of features. You don't need to know how to code. As someone that builds sites for other people, I think it's a great resource because most people don't know how to write a single line of CSS and they have no desire to learn it.
Yeah.
And so this kind of takes out the learning curve for them. As somebody
is Divi only available on Elegant Themes?
No, Divi just released in December when they released Extra. They released a Divi Builder plugin, and I'm actually right now, and it's this morning's project. I'm finishing up a project that a client was actually using Optimize Theme or Optimize Press, something like that. Optimize Press, and we actually loaded the Divi plugin on top of it so that she could control her site easier.
Yeah.
And it worked like a charm. I was like, well, this is going to be interesting. Yeah. Both of these things have very similar pieces, but no issues.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning that drag and drop builders are, like you said, very useful for anybody who doesn't know how to code, doesn't know any CSS, or has no desire to learn it.
Right.
But there is a small drawback, two small drawbacks, I will say. One's a little bit bigger than the other. First one being, if your page builder is built into the theme, like Divi used to be,
Right.
then if you change themes, you lose all that content. If your page builder is a plugin, and you ever disable that plugin for whatever reason, again, you lose that content. It's not just in the WordPress content area. The other issue, which is lesser of an issue, but also very important, is page builders, specifically Divi, will slow your site down a little bit because, for whatever reason, they designed it to run on every single page of your website, even if you're not using the actual. If you just activate it, all of its scripts are running on every page, which means it's going to slow down your site, which is not good for SEO. So there's a little bit of a trade-off. If you're going to go with a page builder, definitely do some research, see which one you like the best. Get one that has a return policy or a trial period so that you can be certain that you are happy with what it does.
I laugh because you don't think of that as a digital product having a return policy, but in this case, it definitely is something that if you're going to spend the money on it and it doesn't work or it does slow down your site, having that return policy is key, right?
Yeah, I mean, at Imagely, all of our products are 30 days money back guaranteed, no questions asked. I mean, we ask anyway why, but we're not going to say no if somebody wants a refund.
Well, and what I've noticed with Divi, like I run, I've not noticed a huge slowdown, but I always throw like WP Optimize with it, and what is it, like EEW Image Optimizer or something like that, and in there, and I've noticed that takes out a lot of the slowdown if you just do stuff right. The other one is I usually find more with photographers that they're loading up very large files into web, and that causes probably more damage than the builder. But I mean, if somebody knows what they're doing, I mean, I like Divi, don't get me wrong, but I'm also a huge fan of the Genesis framework.
Yeah. But that is definitely developer heavy and not for the average photographer.
Yeah. And out of the box, Genesis framework does not like page builders. So if you're going to use Genesis, if you have a Genesis theme and you're interested in a page builder, there's a free plugin called Genesis Dam Buster, like a river dam.
Right.
It's basically busting the walls of Genesis to allow you to use a drag and drop safely on Genesis themes. So
and does that slow it down?
No, Dam Buster doesn't. It just sort of changes some of the themes layers of divs and CSS and things like that to open the walls up so that the drag and drop can go full width and stuff like that.
And we should say the reason that these are the cons, but there are pros to these page builders. They're huge pros, especially because if you do CSS wrong, you can screw everything up and you can want to rip your hair out. And there's like memes going around. I think I saw one from Scott where, you hear CSS and you just want to throw things.
Yeah.
Right.
So this is a solution to that problem, but there are these slight drawbacks.
Yep. Yep.
Right.
But and that's with everything. Everything in life has
side effects.
Yeah. So I use Divi a lot, mostly because just because it's simple for the client. Because my goal, when I'm done with the site, the thing I deal with, and it makes me honestly almost sick to my stomach just talking about it sometimes, is that you get people that have paid $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for a website, which is a lot on any of those, unless it's a super huge site. And when they get done, they don't know how to change anything. They feel like they're trapped. I mean, I spoke with a wonderful young woman yesterday, and she spent over $5,000 on a website that's all HTML, CSS. She can't change anything. The people don't communicate back with her, and she's completely trapped. She has no way to update her site. It's all outdated information, and she's paid a large sum of money for a website.
Is it WordPress?
And no, the ones that she has currently is all like literally hand-coded HTML, CSS.
Wow.
And
I see that a lot, even with WordPress, is that these photographers will pay, a few $1,000s to have a custom theme built, and then they can't update and they can't maintain, and so they're looking for services. That's actually where PhotoScribe, which is a blogging service, was born, because I wanted to help photographers with their WordPress sites, and it turned into needing more help creating regular content. But yeah, I think if you have a WordPress site, as a small business owner and looking for those resources, like you mentioned, those YouTube videos, in order to maintain it past that initial design phase is how you really want to build that site out, knowing that there's going to be maintenance beyond that, setting it up and forgetting it,
Yeah, and so like one of the things I do, and it's definitely, I'm hoping that it changes and more people do it. When I'm done, I ask them what they want to be able to do. Like I have like a little. I love gravity forms. It's probably, it's in my top 5. That top 5 kind of changes depending on my situation, but the order of them, but it's always the same 5. And I have a little gravity forms that I send out, and I say, hey, now that you have access to your site and you've looked around, what are the 5 most scary things that you want to know? Make sure you know how to do. And I get all kinds of answers. Like I have one person was like, well, I want to know that I know how to add photos to my Next-Gen Pro. Well, I can send them to YouTube, but instead I've got Camtasia, so I fire up Camtasia. I go through on their website, and I go through and I show them how to do their top 5 things, cut them a little, 10, 15-minute video, process it out, throw a bumper on each end, throw it up in Google Drive, and send them the link. Yeah. And so then they don't have to come back to me in 2-3 weeks and go, hey, how do I add a post? Well, hey, you know what? Here's a video that's got how to add a post, how to make a change to your page, how to upload images, how to update plugins, all the key components that they need to know. And I've had more people freak out after the fact when they get that than anything else, because they're like, well, I didn't expect this. Well, my goal isn't to build your site. I mean, hey, don't get me wrong. I love building the sites. I love getting paid for it. But I feel it's like a disservice to say, here's your site, bye.
Yeah. I do think that needs to be a mentality shift for photographers. Is a site gets built, but it also needs to be maintained, and that's part of why this podcast is, because we want to help you with your ongoing knowledge of WordPress.
Speaking of maintain, Jake, so you create sites for photographers, you offer coaching for photographers. Do you offer WordPress maintenance plans for photographers? So if I wanted to hire you to run backups for me on a monthly basis to fix anything that might come up if I update a plugin, stuff like that. Do you have a plan for photographers if they contact you?
I do. I don't. I'm not advertising it in a direct method on the new site when it launches. I'm using basically I'm not having any, because everybody's needs are different. So what I found is that it's really hard to say, here's the set plan with X and it's X amount of dollars, because what's going to fit you isn't going to fit this guy, right? You may need, okay, you're busy, WordPress, but you just don't want to have to deal with some of the little things like backups, or, if something breaks, you want to say, hey, Jake, take care of it for me. I got to go take care of my daughter. I got to go run this podcast or work. This other guy may say, hey, you know what, I don't even want to think about it. I want to load my photos up and never have to touch it. And so what I do is I do everything based on small jobs. And basically a small job is what I can accomplish in 30 minutes, which, really with WordPress, 30 minutes is a lot of time. It doesn't sound like a lot of time, 30 minutes. Okay, it's probably what it takes me to cook lunch for my kids or something. But when we say, hey, what can I accomplish in 30 minutes? Well, in 30 minutes, I can go get a new plugin, load the plugin, test it, make sure it works, and probably catch a little video on how to use it so you know what you're doing, or run your backup for you, or whatever. And so I do everything based on these little 30-minute jobs, and depending on how many they need, it fluctuates. I try to keep it cheap so that anybody can afford it. I don't want to try. I'm not trying to. Obviously, I've got a business and I've got a family to feed and stuff like that, but I'm not trying to take advantage of anybody. I try to keep it relatively cheap. So it usually comes out between usually somewhere between $30-$35 a month if you just need a few minor things like backup and stuff. If you want me to maintain your whole thing, and basically I'll be on call whenever you need me for X amount of hours a month, it could be a couple $100.
Yeah.
If you really want that, and I have people that usually, the ironic part is they would rather go, hey, I want you for 20 hours a month to handle all my website needs.
Well, I think it's just that peace of mind too, and that's where the thought of outsourcing these tasks in the photography space, so you can focus on the shooting and the client communications, and it's just another area of like we had Jared Bowen on, he's from Shoot.edit, and that outsourcing the editing portion so that you can have time. I think you need to think about your website as a business task too.
Right.
I think this is a good segue into the 80-20 rule that we wanted to talk about today as well, because really you want to do 80% of your photography and 20% on your website. Right. Maybe even less on your website.
Probably less.
Yeah.
The 80-20 thing, basically what it gets down to is that 80% of all of our success, all of our positive stuff, all of our results come from about 20% of our work or energy in our day. Well, so the kind of the fun thing about that is, so think about that, so for like, I'm going to, you just for Scott, like with what he does for Imagely and the social media piece, and he puts about 20% in, 20% of all that energy he's using is really generating 80% of the results.
Yeah.
So what I try to teach people is, how can you figure out what that 20% is that's generating those results, so you can take that, all the rest of that energy you're expending, and go do something else with it.
And what do you think it is for photographers specifically?
It depends. I mean, I was actually speaking in front of a group of photographers on Tuesday night, and we got into this conversation, and it was really interesting because I had about 20 people in this room. It was a local photography club in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and they're great people. And it was probably a third, and third. A third portrait, a third wedding, a third landscape, which was really, funny.
Yeah.
Depending on which seat you were sitting in, this changed. I mean, for like the wedding photographer, well, where's the largest expenditure of energy? Well, obviously, it's shot probably during an 8-hour period. That's very, very detrimental, because if you miss the shot, you can't go back. That's why you couldn't put enough money behind me to convince me to ever shoot a wedding. You miss the shot, you're hated for life. But and so I think it changes. But like for photographers, I think what happens is, and I fall into this trap. You show up on a scene as a landscape photographer, and it's this beautiful scene, and you shoot. Let's say you spend half a day there, you shoot 300 images or 400 images. Well, when you're lining up that shot that it's probably not a great shot, but you shoot it anyway, right? Going, well, maybe it'll work good in post-processing. Well, if it wasn't a good shot beforehand, there's no amount of post that's going to make it better afterwards, but you still take the time to do it. Then when you go back, you still mess with the shot. So, we spend a lot of time on stuff that we probably know shooting isn't the best shot, but we want to do it anyway. And so I think, one of the things is, photographers, to figure out how to use that 20% of our energy effectively to get that 80% of the result is honestly better time management or better camera management or shot management, however you want to look at it with that camera. And I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't go walk trails and shoot stuff that's fun. But it's, there's a line.
Yeah.
And if you take that same concept to their website, a lot of the people I talked to, actually I had a conversation last week with a photographer. I was like, well, how much time do you spend on your website every month, right? And they were like, I don't know, probably 25 or 30 hours. I said, okay, so how many hours a week? Let's break this down here.
Yeah.
And they said, oh, I don't know, probably, somewhere between 6 and 8 hours a week. I was like, okay, so you're on your website at least once a day, right? Checking it, making sure there's comments, spending an hour on the site, because that's about what you're telling me. And they're like, no, I probably get on it once to twice a week for 3 to 4 hours at a time. So instead of making a task that should be relatively simple, get on your site, check your comments, check your plugins, add a few new photos to push it out there, move on, they bite these huge chunks off. And really, I mean, even as a website guy, and I think Scott and you both can say this, it's really hard to sit here and work on a website for 4 hours straight without getting out of my chair.
Yeah.
I mean, not even with the distractions of life, but just mentally, it's exhausting to sit.
So you're suggesting that photographers make it a system and break it down. And have it be a daily task.
Usually, what I do is I tell people, get up in the morning, get your cup of coffee. As much as it stinks, you go through your email, so you're already on your computer. Go run through your website, add a photo to your website, get your blog. If you blog twice a week, get your schedule set. Right after your email, do your blog post. Then you're done. You can go grab your camera and go play. Go do whatever else you want to do for your business. But don't make it a secondary task.
Yeah.
You know? And
That's
I
a
think
really interesting perspective, and I think that would help a lot of business owners in all types of photography.
Yeah, it's a lot of them. I believe it's fear of the unknown. It's, I don't want to learn a website. It's one more thing I've got to do. Let me hire somebody. Well, and I'm not opposed to virtual assistants. Don't get me wrong. I think I deal with lots of them for different people. They're great. But how much control are you going to hand over? And actually, my partner with ShutterClick Adventures that I do a lot of the trips with is Blake Rudis, and we had this conversation the other day actually about WordPress. And so you take something as important as your website, right? I mean, in the realm of all of us, we don't have a storefront, right? You can't walk into a brick and mortar store. That website is everything to us. It talks about the benefits that we can solve, our photography, our abouts, how to buy the photos, you know, our blog posts, our product reviews. I mean, it's everything we pour into this. And we take that and say, hey, you know what, I don't want to deal with it. I'd rather pay somebody, let's be generous, $25, $30 an hour to do all of that for me. They're going to write my topics. They're going to do my social. They're going to do everything. All I got to do is sit back and take photos. I understand that frees up time, but at the same time, it creates a huge disconnect.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what's going on. So you don't know if you're actually being successful online or not successful. And I'm not saying don't hire somebody to do it, but if you do, still, a couple times a week, find out what's going on. Learn what the analytics mean. Learn what's going on. Learn what posts are working, what ones aren't working. Learn where your money's being spent.
Yeah.
You know, I talked to somebody the other day that spent a fortune on Facebook ads. I mean, I think by anybody's standard, $1,200 or $1,500 a month is a small fortune on Facebook ads.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's a lot of money. And they're like,
getting the return.
They're making next to nothing. They've been doing it for 3 months. And they're like, well, I hired somebody, and they're doing it for me, and they said this is going to work, but I'm not seeing the results. I'm like, well, did you read a book on Facebook marketing before you walked into it, an ebook? You know, they're out there. I got a Kindle floating around here somewhere. I read, you know, sometimes between 5 and 8 books a week.
Yeah.
You know, ebooks, because they're not horribly long, you know, 60, 80 pages. I'm like, did you go buy one of these and read it? Well, I don't have time to read it. Okay, but you have time to throw away $5,000 almost, as opposed to giving up 45 minutes of a day to read an ebook so you understand how Facebook marketing, at least the basics of it. You may not be a master of it, but the gist of it. And I think that's a lot of it is that, you know, we've gotten to the point of I can just hire somebody to do it. It's so convenient anymore with the internet. And there has to be a knowledge of it. I mean, I don't think Scott would go out and hire somebody to write social media posts if he got really busy and just walk away from it. That's what he knows how to do. Now, he might say, hey, you know what, I don't have time to do this. I'm going to hire somebody to assist me and pay attention to them, but he's not going to go, oh, I don't have time for this anymore. It's all yours.
Yeah,
Did anybody else hear that?
Yeah.
What?
I don't know what that was.
That was really weird.
What was it?
It's your level of awesomeness blowing through your new mic.
It sounded like a smoke detector going off for like a second.
I didn't hear it. It wasn't here. It wasn't the cat again. I promise. I just listened to episode 3, and my cat was in the background the whole time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, hopefully that didn't come through in the actual podcast recording. We'll have to see about that. Otherwise, that's gonna be really weird. So that was very, very well said. So we talked about a lot of different topics about how photographers could improve. Some cool tool, a theme or plugin, drag and drop builder they could use to make things easier. So the things are really, really educational for photographers, from start to finish. Do you have any final thoughts before we close up that you want to share? Any final recommendations? Any final product? You want to talk briefly about ShutterClick Adventures, because that's something.
I can. So, ShutterClick Adventures and Scott, you do have to do a trip with me some point. We do got to make this work.
Yes.
So ShutterClick Adventures actually started because my dad, for about 2 decades, ran a huge travel company to do sea kayaking all over the world, and I always wanted to do photography, and so he goes, well, we're a paddling company. So I said, okay, fine. So last year I launched a photo company trying to find workshops, and I got hooked up. Actually, it's actually how I met Scott, and met Blake Rudis, and me and Blake have done Oregon. We're about to do Yosemite and Acadia and Oregon again, and we stick with national parks because we feel that the United States has enough beauty in it and its national parks that we really don't need to travel outside of the states yet. There's just so much to see, so much cool stuff, so many cool times a year. I mean, even here in South Dakota, I get a lot of grief for living here, but come March, I can drive a mile out of town and have no light pollution and shoot the Milky Way in all its forms. So I mean, I just jump in the car, grab a cup of coffee, drive down the road a mile, jump out. There's barns, there's all kinds of cool stuff to use in the foreground, and shoot it. So that's kind of what we're looking at, is how to get that. I mean, even in the big cities, there's a lot of cool stuff that people just overlook or don't even know exists because they're not living there. And so we started doing that. And so what we did is I built the whole platform WordPress based, and it's all WordPress, Divi themes, and Gravity forms, and SEO by Yoast, and some other minor stuff. But the gist of it is to how quick and simple can we make this so that if you find a trip you like, you go from trip to process. And really what it is they're all inclusive trips. So we rent gorgeous condos. We do all the cooking. When we were in Oregon, we did, I would say probably 90% of all the cooking was organic, food, fruits, vegetables, beef, fish, everything. And so you don't have to worry about anything. You show up on the trip, we pick you up at the airport, go to the condo.
And is this just for landscape photographers, or do you have all kinds of photographers come?
So last year was the first year I did it. The trips are all landscape, but ironically, we've had not just landscape photographers come, and I'm actually working with a couple of portrait studio photographers that do like composites and everything, to actually start offering trips like that, because I've had so much interest in that I just don't have it. It's not my skill set, which isn't a big deal, because usually on the trips, my job isn't to teach really anyway. I do the cooking and make sure all the food's good and sit back and let everybody else do their thing. And so it's kind of nice. But yeah, I'm hoping this year to work with 2 different photographers to do some portrait stuff. One of the guys I want to work with actually he's in the military, and he's been over in Dubai for about the last year. So I've been getting all these great shots in Dubai, and he's been doing like modeling shoots and stuff in Dubai. And he's from Tennessee, and he's like, hey, when I get back, let's talk. Yeah. And I'm like, and so he gets back in April. So I don't know if that'll realistically be a 2016 deal, just because of the time of year that we're gonna hit. But maybe it does. Maybe it works. Because I'd like to get into that, because a lot of people want to do it. It's a lot of fun, because we can bring in the makeup artist and the hairstylist and the clothing stylists and do that, and then have him do the studio time, and then we find somebody else or him, whoever can help you with like composite work, because that's a big thing that's people are starting to want to do, is composites.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
So that's great. So it sounds like it's for photographers who want to travel and get different experience with their photography.
Yep.
Oh, awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have any follow-up?
Nope. I think I'm looking forward to eventually doing a workshop with you. That's gonna be a lot of fun when we.
It sounds like I love how knowledgeable you are about WordPress and photography.
Oh yeah. He's very very knowledgeable, and he's been very active in some great forums lately, which is really cool to see as well, spreading that knowledge around.
Yeah.
So thank you, Jake, for joining us today. Thank you, Rachel, for being an awesome co-host.
Thank you, Scott, for having both of us on.
Yes. And you can find the show notes from today at imagely.com/podcast/7.
7. Can you believe 7?
Right. Already. It's crazy.
No.
And I actually think, Jake, you've mentioned Blake a couple times. I believe he's our next guest, actually. So that's
is he?
Fun.
Cool.
Yeah.
He's a hoot, man.
Yeah.
So here, okay, I'm gonna tell you. So you know where he's been for the last 10 days, right? Do you know this?
Hasn't he been doing the military thing?
Yeah. So he ended up getting sucked out to Hawaii. for 10 days for the military. And so he's been sending me photos. Oh, it's rough. And I'll get this picture from Hawaii, and I'm like, rough, right? I go outside and take a picture. It's like 10 degrees out right now.
Right?
You know?
So we'll talk to him
rough.
post-Hawaii, and we'll probably have, 8 feet of snow next week, so here in the Northeast.
Yeah.
So it's been pretty funny because, I do, we do a lot of stuff together and talk, and it's kind of weird when he's gone. I know this sounds funny, but when he's gone for a week, I'm like, okay.
You feel lonely.
I do, because it's I'm like, okay, we're always bouncing stuff off each other because we're doing so much, and I'm like,
yeah.
Hey, I can't ask you. Oh, no, I can't. And so it's really weird because it's you don't think about it until it's not there. But I'm working on, like I was telling you before, I'm working on relaunching my site, and I've had some ideas that I think are good, but I'm like, who knows? Maybe they're horrible. Let me ask Blake. Oh, I can't ask Blake. I gotta wait.
Well, we're looking forward to chatting with him. That'll be our next episode 8, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think he's gonna be on episode 8 right when he gets back from his trip. So. Yeah,
well, he's good. He did a solid, actually. You can give him some grief or some perks on this if you want. One of the gals in our town, she was a senior. She had to, right before Christmas, they gave her, 4 days before her Christmas break, they gave her the chore of, she had to interview a vet and had 50 questions. She had to do a video interview of somebody. And Blake, in the awesomeness that he always has, stood up and just said, I'll do it. I said something to him about it. He's like, I'll do it. And he volunteered. He sat with her on the phone for an hour, answered all her questions. And did everything just because that's, he was like, I'm happy to help. And so it was really cool that he did it. So I'm giving him a shout out for that because it really helped her out, and she's a good kid, and, that's just kind of how he is.
Cool. Yeah. Well, good. I look forward to talking to him, and thank you so much for your time.
Yes.
Anytime.
Awesome. Until next time.
Bye.
You've been listening to the WordPress Photography Podcast. To listen to other episodes and to subscribe to the podcast via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more, please visit imagely.com/podcast.